guys, what's up? Ajax the Mister here, coming at you with my review for the entirety of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. Just as a heads up for you guys, this review isn't going to be, an in-depth, character analysis or, JoJo analysis, however you want to call it, of Part 4 in its entirety. This is just my perspective and what I liked about Part 4 and what I disliked about Part 4, even though the likes, trump easily anything that I disliked about the part that we were currently in with Season 3. And just as a heads up, please excuse my awfulness at attempting to play JoJo Eyes of Heaven. I am just trash at this game. I mean, I know I'm missing combos and abilities, and I just wanted something recorded for this video. But without further ado, let's jump right into the review. First off, I wanted to talk about the characters. Araki somehow always manages to make a lovable cast of characters, especially when it comes to the main cast. You in Part 1, you had JoJo and Speedwagon, and of course some might say Dio because Dio was a huge part of Part 1. Then Part 2, you had Joseph and Caesar. Part 3, you got the bro team of Jotaro, Joseph, Kakyoin, Abdul, and Polnareff, each of them likable in their own right. And in Part 4, we of course got a little bit of Jotaro, a little bit of Joseph, but the main cast this time around was Josuke, Okuyasu, and Koichi. And oh my god, I loved each of these characters, each in their own right for what they brought to the table. Especially, I think out of those three, my main favorite was Koichi. And if you guys have been watching any of my live reactions, you guys certainly know that Koichi was the MVP in almost every single episode. Even episodes where, he couldn't really defeat the baddie in that episode. Of course, one episode in particular I'm referring to is when he had to go up against Keita. Like, there's just no way Koichi was gonna come out on top with a fight like that against Keita the Great, which we will get into later on in this review. But even then, Koichi was getting his ass kicked. He was still somehow able to seem like a badass, calling Keita out, finding out his identity, his last name. Like, Koichi was just amazing. And that's just one instance in this season where he was just a badass, like, outright. And I believe out of all the characters in the main cast, I honestly believe that Koichi had the most character development in my eyes, because when I first started watching Part 4, immediately, first episode you see him in, he's just that typical shonen stereotype, small kid, kind of like on the sidelines, but he's still part of the main cast, and he's, wimpy, scared of everything, always nervous about what he has to say, and so on and so forth. Like, there's just always that typical shonen character on the sidelines that Koichi fits into. And just off the top of my head, the first character that comes to mind at first when I saw Koichi was Mana. I believe his name was Mana from Shaman King. Everyone knows that guy. You got Yo Asakura, badass, shaman, going out to be Shaman King in the Shaman King tournament, whatever it was called. And then you got this little guy, like, just, running around, nervous, screaming his head off, and he was just a nervous wreck throughout the entire series. But Koichi, no. Koichi, he really knew how to pull through on top with all of his scenes, all of his episodes, and he was just a blast to see. And one thing that I pointed out in my live reactions with Koichi was that his evolution of his stand abilities were definitely played in part with how he developed as a character himself in the entirety of Part 4, and I thought that was freaking genius. Like, as we see Koichi stand evolve, we also see him as a character evolve, and that was just beautiful on Araki's part. I freaking love that. And then, of course, you got your dumbass Okuyasu, but he's just one of those lovable dumbasses. And then you got Josuke. I mean, Josuke's a bit of a dumbass at some points, but he's just so lovable. Like, he has the Joseph personality of just like this kind-hearted individual to an extent. Joseph could have, Joseph was sometimes an asshole in some parts, but then if you like piss him off the wrong way, you mess with his friends, but most importantly, if you make fun of his hair, he just flips shit. He turns into like a freaking Jotaro Kujo, and he's gonna give you a Dora that you are not gonna believe. But definitely love Josuke in this part. And another character that had amazing development, Hayato, again, a character that when you first see him, he just seems like this snotty little kid that was like really creepy, kind of introverted, videotaped his parents like doing it. Like it was just, he was a weird ass kid, but he developed into such a badass, almost on the level of Koichi. And it was just amazing to see this kid come through for his mother and just his family. A shame that his mom's gonna be waiting at that doorstep until his dad, his real dad, comes home. But we all know that ain't happening. But yeah, that was definitely awesome to see that character develop into his own throughout the part 4 finale. But let's face it, as each part of JoJo is equally known for its main protagonist, they always have an amazing antagonist to an extent. Sometimes they're not amazing, sometimes they're alright, but in this part, oh my god, Keita Yoshikage. Good lord, did I freaking love this character through and through. And I'm just gonna be honest with you guys from the get-go, when I came into part 4, I immediately had biases towards Dio, because I'm fresh off of part 3, jumping into part 4, and I'm like, yo, you know, Keita might come in and might do a few things here and there, but he's not gonna be no, you know, Dio Brando, the freaking guy that made his presence known on the battlefield wherever he went. And he just had this charisma, this egocentric like attitude, and it was just amazing. You got the Mudas, you got Zawardo. You just have so much to, you know, count on with Dio, and he was just so freaking amazing. So jumping into part 4, I'm like, you know, whatever. I might like Keita, but nothing's gonna beat Dio Brando. Like nothing is. But oh man, like, I don't even know now, because Keita was really an amazing character to see. And the main reason why was because Araki in this part tried nothing to make Keita like Dio. Keita did not want to take over the world or rule over Morio City. He was the exact opposite of everything that Dio stood for. He was just this introverted individual that wanted to live a normal, peaceful life. Well, I want to put normal in quotations because you guys already know how about that Keita greatness. But you know, he just wanted to live a normal life, no disturbances, no distractions. He wanted, like, he even had a schedule set out for himself each and every day of what he would do. Like, off the top of my head, I believe there was something along the lines of he wanted to wake up at 9 or 10 in the morning and go to bed by 8 or whatever. Just something along those lines. Like, he just wanted to live a peaceful life. But that sense of wanting peace in his everyday life, in a way, kind of made him more relatable than the past villains like Dio. In that Keita actually felt like a real person. He seemed like an individual you could probably walk down the street and pass by and you won't know any better, because like the villains are not going out to rule the world. They're just doing shady shit in the background and then, you know, dropping by a Burger King or something and picking up chicken nuggets along the way. Like that is Keita to a letter. And we got to see more of his day-to-day routine through the episodes that focused more so on him as an individual. And that's something we never got with any other villain up to this point in JoJo. You know, in part 1 we got Dio doing stuff with Jonathan, but I don't believe Dio got an actual episode of himself, just by himself, no Jonathan, no, like nothing, just an episode focused on him. We never got any of that. In part 2, dead ass, we did not get an episode focused on the Pillarmen. No cars, no AC/DC, no, none of that. We definitely didn't get any of that. And then in part 3, it was even worse for Dio getting any type of spotlight, because the majority of the time, he was just shrouded in shadows from the times that we would see him. Sometimes we wouldn't even see him for like 5 to 10 episodes. And even then, it would be for like maybe 30 seconds or so, like him just monologuing about, my stand is the best of Zawardo, just something along those lines. But no, all of this changed in part 4, where Keita got so many episodes just focused on him. Like, you might see Josuke in the background, like in the last 5 or 2 minutes, whatever, but the episode was primarily focused on Keita, so you could see what's going through his mind, how he's reacting to certain things, and I freaking loved those episodes, especially when he was on the run from Jotaro and Josuke in the gang, and he was just like petrified out of his mind, watching his every move, and it was amazing. I love those sections with Keita. And in all honesty, I feel like I could just go on and on about why I love this villain in JoJo, but I believe I would be doing a disservice to maybe do a potential future video on just Keita himself, like just a full-on analysis of his character, his tropes, his stand abilities, and whatnot, and just go on from there. But in this video, we're just gonna be talking about the entirety of part 4 as a whole. And of course, I mentioned stand abilities like a couple seconds ago. The stand abilities in this part, good God, do they trump almost every stand ability from part 3, at least in terms of creativeness, because in part 3, we mostly got stand abilities that had some type of like weird gimmick or just some central ability that's pretty much all it could do. Now, just to name a few off the top of my head, again, I don't remember the names of these stand users, but I remember what their tropes were. And one stand user that I remember from part 3 was the one that could turn into a car. I forgot his name, but that was his gimmick. Like, he was basically a car. Like, that was his stand ability. You also had that orangutan dude that basically had a stand ability where it was like a ship, an abandoned ship, roaming around the ocean, and that was basically it. It was just a ship. That was basically his stand ability. And then it had, like, you know, a few other gimmicks here and there. But in part 4, that is definitely where the creative side of Araki was really showing when it came to stand abilities, because we had stand users like Highway Star using like weird ass specific abilities, like he had to be in a tunnel, and then if you walked into the room, you'd be trapped in his stand ability, and then if you ran away, a pair of feet would chase you, and then they would like absorb the nutrients from your body. I mean, his stand was way out there, and there were so many other stand users in this season that just had that level of uniqueness where you know you're not going to see another stand battle or another stand user like that anytime soon. So I definitely like that from part 4. Now, as for the cons of part 4, I gotta say there's really not that many that I can complain about. Again, I loved this season through and through. Like, I just enjoyed almost every episode. But if I did have to pick anything that was kind of annoying for me to see, is what I believe that almost every JoJo part up until this point, well, I mean, there's only been 2 parts that have stand abilities, where they just suffer from some episodes just being the stand user of the week. I believe part 3 was the main culprit for that. I mean, so many episodes. Like, they were enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying these episodes were bad, but it was these episodes where, like, you would meet a stand user and you would just know him for, like, that entire episode. Sometimes for 2 episodes if it was a 2-parter. But then after that, he's done. No longer part of the story. Their main purpose was just to be an obstacle on the way to their ultimate goal. And while in part 4 we didn't have that trope to the extent of part 3, we still kind of did have it in some sections. And just off the top of my head, the main character that I believe was definitely a culprit of this trope in part 4 was John Ken Kid. John Ken Kid basically premiered in one episode where he fought Rohan, and he actually had an interesting stand ability. The ability was to absorb other stand abilities. You would think that something along those lines would be OP as hell. Like, you could have freaking, like, if Josuke had that stand ability, he'd be able to steal, you know, Killer Queens, he'd be able to steal Kyosu's. On paper, it just sounds like an OP ability to have, but since John Ken Kid was just the stand user of the week, we basically just saw him fighting Rohan, you know, a little bit of a tassel here and there, and then at the end of the episode, it kind of sounded like John Ken Kid wanted to be, you know, a protege to Rohan, or at least they hinted that he would, you know, come back or at least make a minor appearance later on in the season. But to my knowledge, we never saw him again. You know, Rohan spared his life, but that was basically it. Like, we got nothing more out of him, and that was mainly because he was the stand user of the week. And of course, there were a few other characters that were like that. But one interesting thing that I did like about part 4 was that in the first, I believe, 20 or so episodes before the introduction of Keita, we kind of had the stand user of the week trope, but what made these episodes really good was that we actually got to saw these stand users later on in the season, whether it be in a way they want to work together to find Keita, or if it's just a small cameo just to see what they're doing now now in life. At least we got to see these guys later on, and they played sometimes a bit of a minor role. So if Araki continues to do the stand user of the week trope, I definitely want him to do it in the manner that he did within the first 20 or so episodes of Part 4. And speaking of which, that's probably another con that I had about Part 4. Even though I loved like the first half of Part 4, one big problem was that Keita did not make his official debut until like I believe it was episode 19 or 20. Like it's around that range. But basically for the first 15-ish to like maybe 18 episodes, we got little glimpses of Keita, but like not his face. Like we might see him walking down the street or him picking up a severed hand, but we did not get an official debut of the main villain of Part 4 until almost halfway through. Now, to some, that might not be a big deal. To me, it really isn't, but at the same time, I just remember going through the first, 15 episodes of Part 4 and wondering, like, yo, what's the goal of this part? Like, are they trying to find someone? Are they gonna enter a fight with, like, a killer queen at some point? But, that was one of the main problems I had within the first 15 episodes. I still enjoyed the first 15 episodes, but again, it was like, yo, when's the main plot gonna kick in? Because the past parts 1 through 3, within the first 2 episodes or so, you already knew what they were going to do throughout the entire part. Like, you knew Jotaro, he was going to fight Dio. With Joseph, he was going to fight the Pillarman. And, of course, Jonathan with Dio and whatnot. But in Part 4, we didn't really have that until like episode 20 or so. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, these cons do not amount to just the amount of pros, the amount of just fun that I had watching Part 4. Like if I'm putting this into comparison with the other parts, because parts 1 through 3, before Part 4 came out, Part 2 was my favorite amongst all the parts. Even though Part 3 introduced stand abilities, and I did love the introduction of stand abilities, Part 2 just had something. I can't really put my finger on it, but just had more of a charm, especially with Joseph as the main character and the bromance he had with Caesar. And of course, the fabulous Pillarman. Like, oh my god. Say what you will about Cars not being a well-developed character and just being a stereotypical villain that wants to take over the world. Those 3 individuals, the villains, AC/DC, Wamu, and Cars, they were freaking fabulous, almost to the extent of Dio, just with their poses and the background music playing. It sounded like Egyptian almost. It was just amazing to see those guys, and I loved the entirety of Part 2. But in comparison to Part 4, Part 4 is my favorite part so far. Because the main reason why I loved Part 2 was because of Joseph, and that mostly stems to the entire package of Part 4. You have a lovable cast of characters. You have recurring faces like Jotaro and Joseph coming in, helping out, giving Josuke a hand. And of course, the main antagonist is memorable. Like, by far, I think Keita is in my top 5 villains in any type of anime whatsoever, because he is just amazing. But again, I could just go on and on about the guy. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this review. Again, guys, I loved Part 4. There was, a few cons here and there. There were a few things that I was not a fan of, but in the long run, this was by far my favorite part. If I had to rank all the parts up until now, Part 4 is definitely first. Part 2 as a very, 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 very close second. Part 3, and then Part 1. And remember, that's not saying, Part 1 is trash or anything. It was good. It's what got me into JoJo. But by far, in terms of ranking and what I preferred, Part 4 easily just trumps all of them. And I cannot wait to see what's in store for Part 5 and onward once we get an official confirmation for Season 4. But let me know what you all thought of the season in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts. What did you like? What did you dislike? Did they faithfully adapt the manga? Did they censor a few words or a few scenes here and there? Because I know for some people, Part 4 is their least favorite part, and for others, it's their most favorite. So I definitely want to get a discussion going on in the comments below. Share your thoughts, what you think, and what you liked about this season of JoJo. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, the death of Shigechi in Part 4, good God, did I not think I was going to bawl tears over this fat piece of crap. Like, oh my god, this kid was so snobby, so rotten in part 4. But when his death episode came, oh my god, did the feels come in, and they were so real, and that just established Keita as this dude that needs to be taken down. But that's all that I have for you guys. If you enjoyed my review for part 4, leave a thumbs up down below. I'd really greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, click on my face bubble right here. You'll stay up to date with all my future videos and content, and I will love you forever. Don't forget, social media links in the description box down below. Follow me in those as well to get more content when the video ends. I'm Ajax the Mister, and as always, folks, thanks for watching.